Lewis Carter was the kind of patient no hospital wanted to keep, even if his name alone could fund an entire wing. He was rich, powerful, and impossible to deal with. At just 32, he already controlled multiple companies, but now he couldn't even control his own body. His condition was rare, a severe neuroimmune disorder triggered by extreme stress. It caused constant pain, insomnia, and sudden episodes where his body simply shut down. The more stressed he became, the worse it got. And Lewis was always stressed. 3 doctors had already requested to be removed from his case. Not because they didn't understand the illness, but because they couldn't handle him. Lewis refused medication schedules, rejected treatment plans, and lashed out at anyone who tried to get close. Some nurses stayed only because of the money his family was paying the hospital. Others tried to impress him, hoping for connections. Lewis saw through all of them. To him, they were all the same, people pretending to care because he was valuable. That morning, another doctor stepped into his room. Barry Hale, early 30s, recently transferred from a rural hospital where resources were limited but patients were real. He had a reputation for being stubborn, direct, and difficult to intimidate. He wasn't impressed by money, and he didn't care about titles. To him, a patient was just a patient. Lewis didn't even look at him at first. He was sitting upright in bed, scrolling through something on his tablet, ignoring the pain that was clearly written across his face. "If you're here to read my chart and tell me what I already know, don't bother," he said flatly. Barry didn't respond right away. He walked over, picked up the medical file that had been tossed aside earlier, and skimmed it quickly. "You haven't slept properly in 4 days. Your cortisol levels are still high, and you've been refusing half your medication." Lewis finally glanced up, annoyed. And you're making your own condition worse," Barry said calmly. That was enough to trigger him. Lewis grabbed the file from Barry's hand and threw it onto the floor. "Get out. I'm not dealing with another one of you." Most doctors would have left. Barry didn't move. For a few seconds, the room was completely silent. Then Barry spoke, voice steady, not loud, not aggressive. "I'm not here because of your money. And I'm not here to make you like me. I'm here because you're sick." Lewis stared at him, expecting hesitation, maybe fear. There was none. Barry didn't bend down to pick up the file immediately. He simply stood there, meeting Lewis's gaze. No apology, no softening, just calm, unshaken presence. Something about that threw Lewis off more than anger ever could. After a moment, Barry crouched, picked up the file, and placed it back on the table. Then he stepped closer to the bed. "Give me your hand." Lewis frowned. "Excuse me. I need to check your pulse." "I said get out." Barry reached forward anyway, not aggressively, not forcing, just steady. His fingers lightly touched Lewis's wrist. And Lewis froze. It wasn't the touch itself. It was the way it felt. There was no hesitation, no hidden motive, no calculation. Just a simple, clinical touch. Calm, warm, neutral. Lewis didn't pull away. Barry checked his pulse, then let go just as naturally. "Your heart rate spikes every time you get worked up. That's not helping you." Lewis looked at him for a second longer than he meant to. Then he looked away, picking up his tablet again like nothing had happened. "You talk too much." "Then I'll keep it simple," Barry replied. "Take your medication. Eat. Rest. Or this gets worse." "You think I don't know that?" "I think you don't care enough to follow through." That should have ended it. Another argument. Another dismissal. But Lewis didn't call security. He didn't press the button to get someone else. He just said, "You're annoying." Barry nodded once. "Good. That means you're still listening." A nurse passed by the open door, surprised to see Barry still inside. Usually, no one lasted more than 5 minutes. Barry ignored the reaction. He adjusted the medication tray, set a glass of water within reach, and turned to leave. "I'll be back in an hour." Lewis scoffed lightly. "Don't bother." Barry paused at the door, then said without turning around, "I will." And then he walked out. For the first time in days, the room didn't feel as suffocatingly empty. Lewis stared at the glass of water for a long moment. Then, almost absent-mindedly, he picked it up. When Barry came back an hour later, he didn't knock. He walked in like he had every right to be there. Lewis was in the exact same position, tablet in hand, but the glass of water was half empty and the medication tray had been touched. That was enough for Barry to notice. Good, Barry said simply as he checked the tray. Lewis didn't look at him. Don't read too much into it. I was bored. Barry didn't argue. Take the rest. I already took some. You were prescribed all of it. Lewis let out a quiet breath, annoyed but not explosive this time. You always this controlling? I'm a doctor. That's part of the job. Barry pulled a chair closer to the bed and sat down without asking. That alone would have irritated Lewis before. Now he just glanced at him briefly, like he was still deciding what to do with this man. Barry checked his vitals again, this time more quickly. You didn't sleep. Didn't feel like it. You didn't feel like breathing either last night, but your body did it anyway. Lewis gave him a sharp look. You think you're funny? No. I think you're pushing yourself toward another episode. That word made Lewis tense. He hated when they called it that. Episodes. Like it was something temporary. Like it would pass. Barry noticed the shift immediately. Pain level. Fine. That's not a number. Then write down whatever you want. Barry didn't. He leaned back slightly, studying Lewis in silence. Not judging, just observing. That silence lasted long enough to make Lewis uncomfortable. What? Lewis snapped. You're worse than yesterday. Lewis scoffed. You just got here. I don't need a full day to see it. That irritated him more than it should have. Lewis put the tablet aside, finally giving Barry his full attention. You think you understand me already? I think you're making it harder for yourself than it needs to be. Lewis laughed once, dry and short. Everyone says that. And everyone leaves when you push back. That landed. Lewis didn't respond immediately. His jaw tightened slightly, but he didn't throw anything this time. He didn't tell Barry to get out either. Barry continued, tone still calm. I'm not leaving. You say that now. I said I'd be back in an hour. I came back. That's not the same. No, it's not. But it's a start. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Barry stood up, adjusted the blanket that Lewis had kicked aside without realizing, and pushed the medication closer again. Take it. Lewis stared at it, then at Barry. There was something different in his expression now. Less resistance. More calculation. You're not afraid of me, Lewis said quietly. Barry shook his head. No. What? Because you're not the worst patient I've had. That caught him off guard. That's supposed to be reassuring? It means I've seen worse. And I stayed. Lewis looked away again, but this time it wasn't dismissal. It was thought. A few minutes later, he picked up the medication and swallowed it without another word. Barry didn't comment. He just noted it mentally. Later that night, things got worse. Around 2 a.m., Lewis woke up in pain. Not the usual constant ache, but sharp, sudden, spreading through his chest and arms. His breathing became uneven. His hands trembled slightly as he reached for the call button. He pressed it once. Then again. No one came. Outside, a couple of nurses hesitated. One of them, Emily, a young nurse who had been assigned to his floor, shook her head. I'm not going in there again. He nearly threw something at me yesterday. Another nurse agreed. Wait for DR. Barry. He's handling that case now. Inside the room, Lewis's breathing got worse. He leaned forward slightly, trying to control it, but the pain kept building. His vision blurred for a second. Then the door opened. Barry walked in. He didn't rush, but he moved with purpose. He closed the door behind him, already assessing the situation. Talk to me. Where? Lewis didn't answer immediately. He was trying to breathe, but it wasn't working. Barry stepped closer, one hand already on Lewis's shoulder, steady and firm. Look at me. Lewis did. Breathe with me, Barry said. Slow. In. Lewis tried, but it came out uneven. Barry adjusted, his grip tightening just slightly, not to restrain but to anchor. Again. In. This time, Barry matched his own breathing to Lewis's, slower, controlled. He didn't let go. After a few seconds, Lewis's breathing started to follow. Still shaky. Still uneven. But better. Good, Barry said quietly. Stay with me. Lewis's hand moved without thinking. He grabbed the front of Barry's shirt, holding on like it was the only stable thing in the room. Barry didn't react. He didn't pull away. He just stayed. Minutes passed like that. No dramatic movement. No panic. Just steady presence. Eventually, the tension in Lewis's body eased slightly. His breathing slowed. The pain didn't disappear, but became manageable. Barry carefully guided him back against the pillows. That was a spike. Stress triggered. Lewis didn't argue. He was too tired. Barry adjusted the four, checked his pulse again, then sat down in the chair beside the bed. He didn't leave. Lewis noticed. "You're still here," Lewis said quietly, voice rough. "I said I would be. You could have called someone else." "I didn't." Lewis looked at him, really looked this time. No performance. No fake concern. Just someone sitting there calm, like this was normal. "You're different," Lewis said. Barry didn't deny it. "I don't treat you like your money. Everyone else does." "I know." Lewis's grip on the blanket loosened slightly. His body finally relaxing enough to feel the exhaustion underneath everything. "Don't leave," he said, almost under his breath. Barry heard it anyway. "I'm not going anywhere tonight." And for the first time since he had been admitted, Lewis closed his eyes and actually fell asleep while someone else was still in the room. The next morning, Lewis woke up slower than usual. Not because the pain was gone, but because for the first time in days, his body had actually rested. The room was quiet. The light hadn't changed much, but something else had. He turned his head slightly and saw Barry still there, sitting in the same chair, leaning back with his arms crossed, eyes half closed, but not fully asleep. Lewis frowned. "You stayed all night?" Barry opened his eyes immediately. "You needed monitoring." "That's not what I asked." Barry stretched his neck once, then stood up. "You didn't wake up screaming." "That's progress." Lewis didn't push further, but he didn't look away either. There was something new in his gaze. Not suspicion. Not irritation. Something closer to curiosity. Barry checked his vitals, quick and efficient. Pain level. Lower. Number. Lewis hesitated, then said 5. Barry nodded once. "Yesterday, it was 8. That doesn't mean anything. It means your body responds when you're not constantly under pressure." Lewis leaned back slightly, watching him. "You think this is all in my head?" "No," Barry said calmly. "I think your body is reacting to what your mind won't deal with." Lewis didn't answer. For once, he didn't argue. A few hours later, Barry came back with something unexpected. "We're going outside." Lewis looked at him like he'd just said something ridiculous. "No, you've been in this room for days. That's not helping. I'm not walking out there in this condition." "You're not walking. There's a chair." Lewis's jaw tightened. "I don't need a wheelchair. You need fresh air." That was the end of the discussion for Barry. He adjusted the 4, disconnected what could be safely paused, and called in a nurse to assist. The nurse was Emily, the same one who had avoided Lewis the night before. She looked nervous, but Barry gave her a quick nod, steadying her. "This won't take long," Barry said. Lewis didn't fight as much as expected. He complained, but he didn't resist physically. That alone was new. A few minutes later, they were on the hospital balcony. It wasn't anything special, just a quiet space overlooking the city, but it was the first time Lewis had been outside his room since admission. The air hit him differently. Cooler. Less suffocating. Barry stood beside him, not too close, not too far. For a while, neither of them spoke. Lewis looked out at the distance, eyes slightly narrowed. "I hate this. Being outside, not being in control." Barry didn't respond immediately. He leaned his arms on the railing, looking in the same direction. "You were never in control of this." Lewis let out a quiet breath. "I control everything else." "And how's that working out for you right now?" Lewis gave a small, humorless smile. "Not great." Another pause. Then Lewis spoke again, voice quieter. "Do you know what people see when they look at me?" "Someone difficult," Barry said honestly. Lewis almost laughed. "They see money. Power. Someone they can use or impress. No one sees this." He gestured slightly to himself, the hospital gown, the 4, the reality he couldn't hide here. Barry didn't rush to respond. He let the words sit. "I see a patient who hasn't let anyone help him properly," Barry said. "That's not the same." "It is to me." Lewis turned his head, studying him. "What?" Barry took a slow breath. Because I've seen what happens when doctors stop caring about the person and only care about the outcome. Lewis didn't interrupt. Barry continued, voice still even, but slightly more personal now. I lost someone like that. They had something treatable. But the doctors were distracted, rushing, doing the minimum. They didn't listen. By the time they realized what was wrong, it was too late. Lewis's expression changed. Not dramatically, but enough. That's why you act like this, Lewis said quietly. That's why I don't leave when it gets difficult. The words hung between them. Lewis looked back at the city. For the first time, there was no defense in his posture. No performance. Just someone tired. They all left, he said after a moment. Every doctor before you. Every person who said they'd stay. They all leave when it's inconvenient. Barry didn't move. I didn't leave last night. That was one night. I'll take it one night at a time. Lewis swallowed, his hand tightening slightly on the armrest of the chair. That's not enough. It's more than zero. That hit harder than expected. Lewis didn't respond. He just looked forward again, breathing slower now. A light breeze passed through, and without thinking too much, Barry took off his jacket and placed it over Lewis's shoulders. The movement was simple, automatic. Lewis tensed for a second, then stilled. You don't have to do that, he said. I know. Lewis didn't take it off. They stayed there a little longer, not talking much. But the silence wasn't heavy anymore. It was steady. Later that day, things shifted again. Lewis had another spike, not as intense as the night before, but enough to trigger the same pattern. His breathing became uneven, his muscles tensed, and his body reacted before he could stop it. This time, he didn't press the call button. He waited, and a few minutes later, the door opened. Barry walked in. Timing, Barry said lightly as he stepped closer. Lewis tried to speak, but the words didn't come out right. The panic was building again. Barry didn't ask questions. He moved in immediately, one hand on Lewis's shoulder, grounding him. Look at me. Lewis did. Breathe. This time it was faster. Easier. Not perfect, but better. Lewis's hand moved again, grabbing onto Barry's wrist. Not as desperate as before, but still holding on. Barry let him. After a minute, Lewis's breathing stabilized. Barry didn't pull away, and Lewis didn't let go. They stayed like that for a few seconds longer than necessary. Then Lewis finally spoke, voice low. Don't let them replace you. Barry looked at him, slightly surprised. No one's replacing me. They will, Lewis said. They always do. Barry shook his head once. Not this time. Lewis searched his face, like he was trying to find something that didn't match the words. He didn't find it. For the first time, he didn't question it either. He just nodded slightly, still holding on to Barry's wrist, not ready to let go just yet. The change didn't go unnoticed. By the end of the week, Lewis's numbers had improved in ways that didn't fully make sense on paper. His pain episodes were shorter. His heart rate stabilized faster. Even his sleep had started to return in small fragments. It wasn't a full recovery, but it was progress. And in a hospital where Lewis Carter had been labeled untreatable, progress was enough to attract attention. That attention didn't come from the right place. Dr. Harrison Cole, the hospital's senior consultant and head of internal medicine, was the first to step in. He was in his late 40s, experienced, polished, and known for handling high-profile patients. He had initially declined Lewis's case after the first few incidents, but now that the situation was changing, he returned. Barry saw him outside Lewis's room one afternoon, speaking quietly with the hospital administrator. We need to reassess the treatment plan, Harrison was saying. This case has become sensitive. We can't rely on a single physician's personal involvement. Barry didn't interrupt. He just walked past them and into the room. Lewis noticed immediately. You're late. 5 minutes, Barry replied. You're late. Barry didn't argue. He checked the monitors, adjusted the 4, then glanced at Lewis. Pain level. 6. Better than yesterday. Lewis watched him carefully. Something's off. Barry didn't respond right away. Who was that outside? Lewis asked. Dr. Harrison Cole, head of internal medicine. Lewis's expression darkened slightly. He wasn't on my case before. He is now. That was enough. No, Lewis said immediately. I don't want him. It's not your decision alone. Lewis's jaw tightened. Everything about my treatment is my decision, not when the hospital board gets involved. Lewis leaned forward slightly, ignoring the discomfort in his body. They're replacing you. Barry met his gaze. They're trying to restructure the case. That means replacing you. Barry didn't deny it. For a few seconds, the tension in the room rose sharply. Lewis's breathing started to shift again, not from pain, but from something else. Something closer to panic. They always do this, Lewis said, voice low but tight. As soon as something starts working, they take it away. Barry stepped closer, not rushing but firm. Look at me. Lewis did, but his focus was unstable. Breathe, Barry said. Lewis tried, but this time it didn't settle as quickly. Barry placed one hand on his shoulder, steadying him. Slow. In. Lewis's hand moved again, grabbing onto Barry's sleeve. Don't let them do this, Lewis said, quieter now, but more urgent. Barry held his position. I'm still here. For now. That's enough. No, it's not. Lewis snapped, the frustration breaking through. It's never enough. People say they stay, and then they leave when it gets complicated. Barry didn't pull away from his grip. I didn't leave when it was complicated before. That was different. Ow! Lewis hesitated. The words didn't come out immediately. When they did, they were lower, less controlled. Because now it matters. That was the first time he said it that clearly. Barry's expression shifted, just slightly. Before he could respond, the door opened. Dr. Harrison Cole stepped in, composed as always. Mr. Carter, he said smoothly. I believe it's time we reviewed your treatment plan. Lewis didn't look at him. Get out. Harrison didn't react to the hostility. I understand you've grown comfortable with Dr. Barry Hale, but for a case of this complexity, we need a broader approach. I said get out. Barry straightened slightly, but didn't step away yet. Harrison continued, tone still controlled. This isn't about comfort. It's about proper medical protocol. Emotional dependency on a single physician can interfere with objective treatment. That word hit exactly where it needed to. Dependency. Lewis's grip on Barry tightened. I'm not dependent, Lewis said sharply. Harrison gave a small, polite nod. Of course. But the data suggests otherwise. Your responses correlate strongly with Dr. Hale's presence. That's not sustainable. Barry finally spoke. His condition is stress-induced. Stability helps. Stability, yes. Attachment, no. Harrison corrected. The room went quiet for a moment. Lewis looked between them, his breathing starting to shift again. Not as intense as before, but enough to show the pressure building. Barry noticed it immediately. Not now, Barry said quietly. Harrison glanced at the monitor. Another episode? Not yet, Barry replied. But it will be if this continues. Harrison folded his arms slightly. Then perhaps this is exactly why we need to intervene. Lewis let out a short, unsteady breath. You don't get to decide that. Harrison looked at him directly. I'm responsible for this department. I do get to decide. That was it. Lewis's control snapped. His breathing became uneven, his chest tightening as the familiar wave hit him again. But this time it wasn't just physical. It was emotional. Anger, fear, frustration, all at once. Barry moved immediately, stepping between Lewis and Harrison without making it obvious. One hand on Lewis's shoulder, grounding him again. Look at me. Lewis tried, but his focus was breaking. Breathe, Barry repeated. Harrison watched for a second, then stepped back slightly, finally recognizing the situation. Barry didn't look at him. His attention stayed on Lewis. Barry said, slower this time. Lewis's grip shifted, this time grabbing onto Barry's arm, pulling him closer. Barry didn't resist. Stay with me, Barry said. The room faded into just that moment. Just breathing. Just presence. It took longer this time, but eventually Lewis's breathing slowed again. Not perfect, but controlled. Barry stayed where he was. Harrison finally spoke again, quieter now. I'll give you two a moment. He left the room. The door closed. Silence. Lewis didn't let go. Barry didn't move either. For a few seconds, neither of them said anything. Then Lewis spoke, voice rough, lower than before. You see what happens. Barry nodded slightly. I do. They take everything that works and replace it with something safe. Barry looked at him. I'm not safe. Lewis let out a weak, almost breathless laugh. No, you're not. Another pause. Then Lewis said it quieter but clearer than before. If you leave, this doesn't work. Barry held his gaze. I'm still here. That's not an answer. Barry didn't respond immediately. Instead, he reached up, just slightly, adjusting the edge of Lewis's collar where it had shifted during the episode. The movement was small, controlled, but closer than anything before. Lewis didn't move away. Their distance closed without either of them stepping forward. Lewis's breathing was still uneven, but calmer now. His hand was still gripping Barry's arm, not as tightly, but not letting go. Why are you staying? Lewis asked. Barry finally answered, voice quieter than usual. Because it's you. That landed harder than anything else. Lewis's eyes didn't move away from his. For a second, neither of them moved. Then Lewis did something he hadn't done before. He leaned in. Not fast. Not impulsive. Just enough. Barry didn't step back. Their foreheads almost touched before Lewis stopped, hesitating for a fraction of a second. Then he closed the distance. The kiss was soft. Not demanding. Not rushed. Just contact. Warm, steady, real. Barry froze for half a second, surprised, but he didn't pull away. He stayed. The moment stretched, quiet, and controlled. When Lewis pulled back slightly, their foreheads rested together, both of them breathing slower now. Not perfect, but steady. And for the first time since this all started, Lewis's body wasn't fighting him. It was calming down. The morning after the kiss, nothing was said about it. Not immediately. But everything had changed. Lewis woke up before Barry arrived, which hadn't happened since he was admitted. His body felt lighter, not cured, not completely stable, but different. The constant pressure in his chest had eased, and for once, he didn't wake up already exhausted. When Barry walked in, carrying the usual chart and a cup of coffee he hadn't asked for, Lewis looked at him differently. Not guarded, not defensive, just aware. Barry paused for half a second when their eyes met, then continued like normal. Vitals first. Lewis didn't argue. He extended his arm without being told. That alone said more than anything else. Barry checked his pulse, then glanced at the monitor. Heart rate is lower. Cortisol levels dropped overnight. Lewis gave a small, quiet response. I slept. Barry nodded once. I can tell. There was a brief silence. Not awkward, just unspoken. Then Lewis said, Are we going to pretend that didn't happen? Barry didn't look away. We're going to focus on your recovery. Lewis almost smiled. That's not an answer. Barry adjusted the force slightly. It's the one that matters right now. Lewis didn't push further, but he didn't let it go either. Later that day, the hospital pressure returned. This time, it wasn't subtle. A formal review was scheduled. Present were Dr. Harrison Cole, the senior consultant, MS. Rebecca Lynn, the hospital administrator responsible for high-profile patients, and 2 board representatives. Barry was called in. Lewis found out 5 minutes later and insisted on being there. He's my doctor, Lewis said when they tried to stop him. You don't review him without me. They let him in, reluctantly. Rebecca Lynn, calm and professional, began the meeting. Mr. Carter, Dr. Hale, thank you for joining. We're here to assess the current treatment approach and ensure it aligns with hospital policy. Lewis didn't sit back. Say it clearly. You want to replace him. Harrison folded his hands. We want to reduce over-reliance on a single physician. Your recent improvement is noted, but the pattern suggests a strong correlation with Dr. Hale's presence. Barry remained quiet. Rebecca continued. In cases like this, emotional dependency can complicate long-term outcomes. We're proposing a team-based rotation moving forward. Lewis's expression hardened. No, Harrison kept his tone even. Mr. Carter, this isn't about preference. It's about sustainability. Lewis leaned forward slightly, ignoring the discomfort. You had sustainability before. 3 doctors. None of them worked. He does. Rebecca interjected gently. And we're not dismissing that. But protocols exist for a reason. Lewis didn't look at her. He looked at Barry. Do you agree with him? Barry didn't answer immediately. That silence was enough to tighten something in Lewis's chest. Then Barry said, I agree that your recovery matters more than anything else. That's not what I asked. It's still my answer. Lewis exhaled sharply. If you step back, this falls apart. Harrison stepped in. That's exactly the concern. If one variable determines the entire outcome, it's not stable. Lewis turned to him. You're wrong. It's not the variable. It's the way he treats me. The room went quiet. Rebecca watched closely. Explain. Lewis didn't hesitate this time. Everyone else treated me like an investment or a liability. They either tried to impress me or avoid me. He didn't do either. He treated me like I was actually sick. Harrison replied, that doesn't negate the risk of overattachment. Lewis's voice dropped, but it didn't lose strength. Call it whatever you want. I call it trust. Barry looked at him, really looked this time. There was no performance in Lewis's words. No manipulation. Just clarity. Rebecca tapped her pen lightly, thinking, Dr. Hale, your perspective? Barry kept it simple. His condition is heavily influenced by stress. Consistency helps reduce that. If removing me increases stress, it will negatively affect his recovery. Harrison countered, then the goal should be to build resilience, not reliance. Barry nodded slightly. Agreed. But removing the only stable factor too early isn't building resilience. It's triggering relapse. Another silence. Then Lewis spoke again, quieter, but more controlled. You want proof? Watch this. He stood up slightly, not fully, but enough to shift his position. His breathing changed, subtle but noticeable. He looked at Barry. Stay where you are. Then he looked away, focusing on the table instead of Barry. Within seconds, his breathing became uneven. His chest tightened. It wasn't a full episode, but it was enough to show the pattern. Rebecca leaned forward. Sit back, Mr. Carter. Lewis ignored her. He kept his focus away from Barry. His hands started to tense. Harrison noticed. That's enough. Then Barry moved. He stepped closer, placed a hand on Lewis's shoulder, firm and steady. Look at me. Lewis did. Immediately, his breathing slowed. Not instantly, not perfectly, but noticeably. Within seconds, the tension dropped. The difference was clear. No explanation needed. Rebecca leaned back slightly, processing. Harrison didn't speak. Lewis exhaled slowly, then looked at them again. That's your data. The room stayed quiet for a few seconds longer. Then Rebecca nodded once. Understood. She turned to Harrison. We'll revise the approach. Dr. Hale remains primary physician. Additional support will be introduced gradually, not immediately. Harrison didn't argue. Noted, the meeting ended there. Not because everyone agreed, but because the outcome was obvious. As they left, Lewis walked slightly slower than usual. Barry stayed beside him, not guiding, not holding, just there. When they reached the room, Lewis stopped. You hesitated. Barry didn't deny it. I had to consider the bigger picture. Lewis looked at him. And you're part of that picture. Lewis let out a quiet breath. That's not something I hear often. Barry gave a small, almost invisible smile. Get used to it. The next few days were different. Not dramatically, but consistently. Lewis followed the treatment plan without arguing. He ate when he was supposed to. He rested when told. And he stopped pushing people away for no reason. Emily, the nurse who had avoided him before, noticed it first. He didn't yell at me today, she whispered to another nurse. That's new. The numbers backed it up. Pain levels decreased. Sleep improved. Episodes became shorter and less frequent. And the biggest change wasn't the medication. It was his state of mind. One afternoon, during a routine check, Barry finished adjusting the 4 and stepped back. You're stabilizing faster than expected. Lewis looked at him. You're surprised? A little. Lewis leaned back, more relaxed than before. Maybe it's not just the treatment. Barry didn't respond, but he didn't dismiss it either. A few days later, Lewis was cleared for discharge. It wasn't a full recovery, but it was enough. Enough to leave the hospital. Enough to continue treatment without constant monitoring. The morning he was supposed to leave, he stood near the door, Not in a suit, not in control of the boardroom, just in simple clothes, waiting. Barry entered with the final paperwork. You're cleared. Follow up in 1 week. Lewis didn't take the papers immediately. That's it. That's how discharge works. Lewis nodded slowly, then reached out and took the papers. But instead of looking at them, he looked at Barry. If I walk out that door, you're not my doctor anymore. Barry held his gaze. I'll still be your doctor during follow-ups. That's not what I mean. Barry understood. He just didn't answer right away. Lewis stepped closer, not rushed, not dramatic. I don't want this to end like everything else. Barry didn't step back. Then don't treat it like everything else. That was enough. Lewis nodded once. Then, without overthinking it, he reached out and took Barry's hand. Not tight, not desperate, just steady. Barry let him. No resistance, no hesitation. Just like that for a second. Then Lewis let go. I'll see you in a week. Barry nodded. You will. Lewis turned, opened the door and walked out. No hesitation this time. A few days later, just before sunset, Barry finished his shift and stepped outside the hospital. And there he was. Lewis. Not in a suit. Not surrounded by people. Just standing there waiting. Barry walked toward him. You're early. Your appointment is in 3 days. Lewis gave a small smile. I know. Then why are you here? Lewis looked at him, calm, steady. Because I don't need you as my doctor right now. He paused for a second, then added, I just need you. Barry didn't answer with words. He stepped closer instead. Close enough that the space between them disappeared again. Lewis didn't hesitate this time. He leaned in, slower, more certain, and kissed him. Soft. Familiar. Not a question anymore. Barry responded just as calmly. When they pulled back, neither of them moved away. The city stretched out behind them, quiet, distant. Barry shifted slightly, his arm coming up, resting lightly across Lewis's shoulders. Not pulling. Just there. Lewis leaned in just a little. No resistance. No walls. Just presence. Lewis looked out at the distance, then said quietly, I used to think I needed to control everything to survive. Barry didn't interrupt. Lewis continued. Turns out I just needed one person who wouldn't leave. Barry glanced at him, then back at the horizon. Then don't give me a reason to. Lewis almost smiled. And for the first time, it wasn't forced. It was real.